what is the appropriate intonation for a text. Here's a text of a dialogue. We can't speak a dialogue on a monotone. We're not going to say, hey, you were going to return those books of mine you borrowed, which books I can't remember borrowing any. No, we've got to put an intonation on it. How do we decide what to do? Well, people speaking naturally, of course, do it because they know how to in their native language. They don't know that they know this. It's a big mystery of language. We know how to manipulate the language, though we don't understand what we're doing. What we're doing now is to analyze this, to make clear the principles involved, so that we can work out how to do it from logic. So, really, this is going to be your job. What are the things that we do? Well, Dr. Ashby gave you 2 steps. I'm going to give you 3 steps. The first 2, though, are the same as her first 2 steps. And I quite agree with her. The first thing to do is to, as we say, decide the tonality. That is, you must break the material up, divide it into chunks, into pieces. Putting the same thing a different way, you must locate the intonation breaks. Where are the breaks going to go between the successive pieces? So, there is our first little bit of the dialogue. And I've broken it into pieces for you. It started with an interjection. Now, interjections usually are said as a separate intonation phrase. It's not absolutely compulsory. The speaker has some discretion about this. This is generally true about intonation. The speaker has discretion. There is not just one right answer. There are several possibilities. So what I've chosen to do is not necessarily the only way of doing this, but it's the one that seemed to me to be most natural, and we can discuss if there are other possibilities. And in general, throughout today's session, I do invite you to make your comments, to say if you think something different would be possible or could be interesting or better than what I've got here. This is not the last answer. Now, the other thing that I do with longer dialogues is I number each group, each intonation phrase. This makes it easier to refer to them when you have several on the screen. So I can say, okay, number 1, we've got just one word. In number 2, we've got a whole sentence. And then I can discuss, do we need a break between 1 and 2? We don't actually need one. We could put it all into one longer group, but it's better with a break, I think. When B answers, it's clear that we have 2 groups, 2 intonation phrases, and the break goes corresponding to the punctuation. Because very often, of course, intonation breaks do correspond to punctuation marks, to commas, to full stops, though not always. Well, that's our first job, divide it into chunks. What's the second job? We have to decide where the nucleus goes. Well, putting this in more complicated terminology, we have to decide the tonicity. That is, more generally, the accentuation. Which syllables do we accent? And in each intonation phrase in particular, we have to locate the nucleus together with any other accents. The nucleus, by definition, is the last accent and the most important accent. Well, where do you think the nucleus is going to go in number 1? No choice, only one syllable, must go on that. Where is it going to go in number 2? Are you going to return those books of mine you borrowed? Now, this is a difficult dialogue chosen to illustrate problems. And we have straight away a kind of exception. This is not for beginners. The problem is that this is one of these constructions in which an object noun phrase has been moved, namely the object of borrowed. You borrowed some books. In English, when we make a WH question out of the object, we move the whole noun phrase to the beginning, and we're left with a gap after borrowed. So the verb is now final. Transitive verb in final position, which is an unnatural place for transitive verb to be. And the intonation, in fact, reflects this. Where does the nucleus go? Any ideas? Not on borrowed. It's going to go on the object, which is books. It goes on the last noun. In fact, we usually teach the rule that the nucleus goes on the last lexical item that adds new information. But there is a sort of rival movement that says, no, the rule you ought to teach is the nucleus goes on the last noun. Because there are sentences like this where that has to be the case. Well, what we're going to say is, are you going to return those books of mine you borrowed? Books is going to get the nucleus. And now in number 3, where's the nucleus going to go? This is easy. Which? Books is given, isn't it? Books is repeated. So the nucleus goes on which, unless we're Spanish. And now in number 4, I can't remember borrowing any. Well, any is a function word, it's not going to go there. Start at the end and work back. Not going to be any. Was it going to be borrowing? No, it's repeated. Remember? Yeah, possibly. The other place it might go is I. I can't remember borrowing any, with the implication you remember my borrowing those books, but I can't. I don't. So there are my suggestions for the location of the nucleus. Hey, you're going to return those books of mine you borrowed? Which books? I can't remember borrowing any. And of course I've been helping you with the third stage. What's the third stage? Choosing the tone. Decide each nuclear tone. Is it going to be a fall, or a rise, or a fall rise? Now, I try where possible to operate in the very simple 3-tone system, fall, rise, fall, rise, which we started with Dr. Ashby. You can, yes, subdivide them into high fall, high rise, low rise, and so on, but I prefer, in fact, to leave that a little bit later. So I'm today going to operate just with those 3. So, what are we going to have? What are we going to do for the interjection, hey, at the beginning? Is it going to be hey? Is it going to be hey? Is it going to be hey? Which do you think? Hey! It's going to be a 4, yeah. That's the usual default for attention drawing interjection. Now what have we got next? We've got a question. Questions fall into 2 main groups. Yes-no questions and WH questions. Yes-no questions capable of being answered by yes or no. WH questions which ask you which, who, why, when, where, want a more specific answer. Which is this? It's a yes-no question. The basic rule in intonation is that yes-no questions tend to have a rise, WH questions tend to have a fall. Which is this? It's a yes-no question, so it's going to tend to have a rise. You're going to return those books of mine you borrowed? Now we've got another question in number 3, but this is a WH question. So a WH question is likely to have a fall. The way I've done number 4 is, again, rather advanced, rather tricky. Putting the nucleus on I for reasons of contrast. A contrast between what the other person remembers and what I remember, implying that we don't agree on what happened. And we're emphasizing the difference between the 2 of us. You think that, I think this. And to draw a contrast, one of our favorite tones is a fall rise. So that's in fact how I would do this. Hey, Are you going to return those books of mine you borrowed? Which books? I can't remember borrowing any. Would you like to try doing it aloud with me now, everybody? Let's take it phrase by phrase. We start with number 1. Just do it after me. Hey.
Hey.
That's easy. Are you going to return those books of mine you borrowed?
Are you going to return those books of mine you borrowed?
Yes. Notice I have also indicated an accent on going. That's the part that Patricia's students do in their next term, and we didn't get as far as it. This is the business of heads, preheads, and so on, which those of you who've studied intonation will know about. It means that we do have some kind of accentual prominence on going. Are you going to return those? And then we get our rise, drop down to the bottom so as to come up. Books of mine you borrowed. Are you going to return those books of mine you borrowed? Everybody? Are you going to return those books of mine you borrowed? Once more. Are you going to return those books of mine you borrowed? Which books?
Which books?
Which books? Go over the fall. Now, fall rise with a long, long tail. What did Dr. Ashby tell you about the tail? Fall on the nucleus and delay the rise. So where's the rise going to come? Well, somewhere at the end, borrowing any, somewhere there. I can't remember borrowing any.
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 I found that some people find it helpful if the teacher whistles the tune, because that gives you just the pure movement of the pitch with nothing else. So, hey, are you going to return those books of mine you borrowed? Which books? I can't remember borrowing any. Yeah, well, I don't know if that works or not. Other people like to use a swanny whistle, which requires a certain manual dexterity. Let's go on. Now, you think about the next one. The ones about biology and language. Those books. Could I keep them a few more days? First of all, what's our first step? Break it into pieces. Chunks. Tonality. Where do the breaks go? What A says? Is this one group or more than one? Which books? Which books? The ones... Well, actually, there's an ambiguity here. Does he mean the ones about biology and the ones about language? From the context, probably not. If you did mean that, then you could say the ones about biology. Oh, and language. But you probably say the ones about biology and the ones about language. No, that's not the meaning here. This means books about both of those topics together, so one group. The ones about biology and language. Next break goes where the punctuation is at the full stop. Now, there's a special problem with hesitation noises. This is a hesitation. This is what Americans write UH. Because if they wrote it like we do as ER, it would mean and they don't hesitate with they hesitate with R. So we spell hesitation different in British and American. But the thing to remember about hesitation noises is they stand outside intonation. They don't have an intonation pattern. They're usually on the sort of middle pitch. We haven't decided whether to go high or low. We haven't made up our mind. So for intonation markup, like now, we ignore them. Cross it out and put it in brackets or something, but we don't give it any intonation treatment. And the rest of it is all one group. So we can do our break into groups. And I've numbered them again, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've given it a number so we can just say that intonation phrase 8 doesn't have any pattern in it at all. Right, next step. What's the next step? Decide on the place of the nucleus. So, in number 5, what's the right place of the nucleus? The rule is to start at the end and to work back. Language. Is language new? Yes. So that's the place for the nucleus. Lang of language. Number 6. Now this is again an interjection. And interjections tend to have their own intonation. So I've given it a separate group. It's only one syllable, so it must have the nucleus. What about those books? Where does the nucleus go? On books? No, that's repeated. So on those, must go on those. We discussed, could I keep them a few more days? Is days new? Yes. So, easy. Nucleus goes at the end. Language, oh, those, nothing on earth, days. I've also put in accent marks for each syllable that will get an accent. Those on the nuclear tones, we're going to replace it with an appropriate tone mark, tonetic stress mark if you like, the other ones will remain. So now let's choose our nuclear tones. The ones about biology and, now is it going to be the ones about biology and language? That's a fall, or will it be the ones about biology and language? That's a rise. Or will it be the ones about biology and language? That's a fall rise. Which is most appropriate? The ones about biology and, yes, language. Why? Why do we use a fall? Well, a fall is the basic tone we use to make a definitive statement. It's the way we make a straightforward assertion. So you can regard the fall as being the default tone, the unmarked tone, the neutral tone for statements. It's appropriate here. The ones about biology and language. The ones about biology and language. Those of you who know about heads, you'll notice that the head starts on ones, the onset some people call it. We jump up to a high level there. The ones about biology and language. Now, what are we going to do with our interjection, number 6? We're going to say, oh. Are we going to say, oh? Are we going to say, oh? A fall is right. Yes, it means, I've just noticed, but I'm exclaiming. I'm surprised you don't know what I mean. Exclamations always have a fall. This seems to be an iron rule in English. Exclamations, what a lovely day. What a nice thing to say. Isn't it awful? That's marvellous. Exclamations, anything you could write with an exclamation mark tends to have a fall. So, oh, and here again we've got another fall, those books. Yes, those books. Oh, those books. Nothing. Now, we've got a question. Is it a yes-no question or a WH question? Yes-no. Yes, you could, no, you couldn't. What's the default pattern for yes-no questions? Rise. So probably it's, could I keep them a few more days? Now, these, I remind you, the choice of tone in particular is not the only possibility. You certainly can say with a fall, could I keep them a few more days? That's all right. So it's most likely to be with a rise, but it could be with a fall. It could be with a fall rise. Could I keep them a few more days? Tentative, uncertain or something. Has a special meaning. There it is with the tone marks shown. Fall on language, 2 falls on O and on those. Those books. Now it's your turn, I think, to practice saying that. So let's take it, the first one, number 5, the ones about biology and language. Everybody? The ones about biology and language. Oh, those books. Oh, those books. Could I keep them a few more days? Could I keep them a few more days? days, days. Remember to drop down so that you can rise. Could I keep them a few more days? Could I keep them a few more days? Everybody? Could I keep them a few more days? Lovely. Well, our first job to divide it into chunks, that's easy. We clearly have only one for y. How many chunks do we need? How many intonation phrases for the next bit? For because I need them for my essay? Probably all one, yeah. And the last bit, but you've had them for a month already. 1, 2? Both are possible. I've divided the second one into 2. You could leave it out. You could say, but you've had them for a month. Or you could add something, intensifying it already. Next job, locate the nucleus. No problem with number 10, only one syllable available. Where does the nucleus go in number 11? Easy, isn't it? It's got to go on essay because it's new. Because I need them for my essay. Number 12, again easy, it must be on month because that's new. Already it must go on red. Why? Because I need them for my essay, but you've had them for a month already. Our last job is to choose the tones. Why is the WH question? What's the default pattern for WH questions? Why? For. Why? 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 It wouldn't be possible to use a rise. Why? Yes, it's rather rude. It sounds recalcitrant, disobedient, reluctant to carry out what the other person's wishes might be. So you have to be careful. Very often, intonation patterns other than the default one have these special meanings which may be specific to English. That's why the safe advice to foreign learners is to follow the default patterns, and then you won't be saying things that you seem to imply and you didn't mean. This is the big problem with intonation in a foreign language. As far as segments are concerned, vowels and consonants, we know we have to make allowances when we're talking with people who are not native speakers of our language. And we're used to that idea. But people don't realize that intonation varies from one language to another, and in particular that the same pattern can have different meanings in different languages. And this is the big trap, because your interlocutors, the people you're talking to, will assume you mean what you seem to be saying with your choice of intonation patterns. And if that's not what you intended to say, to imply, then there's a problem. Well, that's worrying. Okay, so why with a 4? A statement again, because I need them for my... So default pattern for a statement is a 4, essay. Now, what about the last bit? Here, for the first time, we've got a statement divided into 2 pieces. So far, we've been considering just one clause at a time, one sentence at a time. Now we've got to start thinking about what happens when we have a combination of 2, a dependent and an independent component, a subsidiary and a main component. And in English, the big thing to remember is that the default pattern, when you have something preliminary or subordinate, and then something complete and final, is 4 rise and 4. When you have something that is more or less complete in its own, and then there's an afterthought, the default pattern is 4, and then rise. This is a bit difficult because you could see it either way around, and sometimes you see it's a matter for the speaker to decide which is the main bit and which is a subordinate bit, and we signal it by the choice of tones. Always the fall tells you the main part. Here we have a choice, in fact. We could make the month the main part, but you've had them for a month. And then already, we'd probably use another fall on the end because this reinforces. When adverbs at the end reinforce, they repeat the fall. When adverbs limit, then they have a rise. But you've had them for a month, I think. I think would limit would not be reinforcing it, it would be weakening it, and so it has a rise. But when it strengthens it, it has a fall. You've had them for a month already. Alternatively, we treat the already as the main part, and we then use the pattern of a fall rise and a fall. But you've had them for a month already. That, I think, is a bit better because it also, the fall rise, draws a contrast. That's one of its main meanings, a contrast between what is and what isn't. You've already had them for a month, contrasting with some shorter period which might be tolerable, but you've had them for a very long period. You've had them for a month. Then we have our fall already. And that's what I chose. Why? You tried? Why? Why? And then another fall, because I need them for my essay. Because I need them for my essay. By the way, do people teach the weak form 'cause, meaning because? I recommend it. It's what native speakers say all the time. Because I need them, because I need them, because I need them, because I need them for my essay. It's not obligatory, you can say because I need them, but it's fussy, it's over-detailed. Native speakers say because I need them for my essay. Everybody? Because I need them for my essay. Alright, but you've had them for a month, do that bit, but you've had them for a month, down and up again on month, but you've had them for a month. Yes, those of you who know about heads will notice a falling head on had. I'm not marking it in any special way because we leave that to the later stage. But you've had them for a month already. Fall on already. Already. Whole thing, but you've had them for a month already. But you've had them for a month already. But you've had them for a month already. Again, because you've had them for a month already. Lovely. Chunking, tonality. How are we going to break this up? Well, probably we'll have a break at the mark, the same place where the comma is. And another one, of course, where the full stop is. That'll probably do, I think. When I remember, I try and use a single mark for a break within a sentence and a double mark between sentences. There's actually probably a complete hierarchy of these things. All that matters is the relative importance of them, and that will do. So I don't make a big fuss about the status of the different sizes. And I tend not to put them at the end of an utterance because there it's self-evident. Though I noticed that Dr. Ashby was very carefully putting them at the end as well, which perhaps is good. Okay, 14, 15, 16, 17. Where are we going to put the nucleus now in each of these? Well, again, remember the rule. Start at the end, work back. Monday. Is Monday new? Yeah. So the nucleus goes on Mon. Back. Have the back. Is back new? Yes. Now, this is a word that might cause you to hesitate because you might think, well, it's sort of grammatical or function word. However, when we have phrasal verbs, like have, back, we have to distinguish between those where the particle, the second element, is a preposition, which tends not to be accented, and those where it's an adverb, which tends to be accented. And this one is an adverb and gets accented. So we say to have something back. So back is the right place for the nucleus. Right. Number 16. How many syllables here? 2. So we've got a choice. Do we put the nucleus on the O or on the K? K. 17. Now, nucleus on so or on suppose or on I? So is a word that doesn't give any new information at all. It actually means yes. I suppose yes. Or I suppose it's true. I suppose that's right. It's just a dummy, a filler. It doesn't have much meaning. It's typically unaccented. So the nucleus goes on pose. I suppose so. So here's my idea for the accents. Just give me until Monday, and then you can have them back. Okay, I suppose so. And our third job is to fill in the tones. All right, what are we going to do on Monday? Well, this is a good example of anything is acceptable. You could do it with a form. Just give me till Monday, then you can have them back. You could do it with a rise. Just give me till Monday, and then you can have them back. You could do it with a 4 rise. Just give me until Monday, and then you can have them back. So, I think you should be pleased that there are many cases where this is the case. Teachers sometimes come to me, or learners, and they're worried. They say, we must have a rule. We know we must be told which one is right. And all I can say here is that all 3 are right. And it doesn't make a great deal of difference which one you use in this case. When we come to back, however, number 15, now here, this is a firm statement, so it needs what tone? A fall. So something or other on Monday in 14, then a fall in 15. 16, this is a form of yes-no question. And this must have what? A rise. Okay? 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 We come back with a statement. False. So, what I'm suggesting is a fall on Monday, and I say the others are possible. Another fall on back, rise on K, fall rise. Well, I suppose so. Aha, that's not what I said. I suppose so. What's the difference in meaning between I suppose so? I suppose so means, okay, yes, that'll do. But I suppose so has an implication. 4 rises give you added implications. 4 rises are very important in conversation. 4 rises mean I mean something, but I'm not saying it explicitly. A 4 rise means but something else. I suppose so. I suppose you can give it to me on Monday, but I'd really like it back tomorrow. Or but I won't be satisfied. Or but I won't be pleased. Or but I think you're behaving very badly. So a 4 rise gives this extra meaning and is perhaps the best way to do it. Imitate me then. Just give me till Monday. Just give me until Monday. Everybody? Just give me until Monday. And then you can have them back. Then you can have them back. Okay. Okay. I suppose so. I suppose so. I suppose so. I suppose so. There is our whole dialogue then. And there it is after the second stage, when it's broken up into chunks and with the nucleus marked. And there it is after our third stage with the tone. And I think if you approach this general problem in this 3-stage way, break it into pieces, deal with each piece at a time. In each piece, locate the nucleus, start at the end and work back until you find something new, and something that's lexical. And then, finally, choose the appropriate tone. So in the new book that I've written, that will, I hope, appear next year, after an introductory chapter, I've got separate chapters about each of these topics, about the tone, about the place of the nucleus, and about breaking it into pieces. And then at the end, a chapter putting it all together and some practice dialogues and all that. But I think thinking about things logically in this way does make it easier to come up with the right answer. You see, the textbooks we have at present, the practice books like O'Connor and Arnold, marvellous stuff, but it doesn't approach it from this end. It just gives you models that you have to imitate parrot fashion. And I'd like to engage the learner's intellectual powers to understand what is going on and why we choose particular patterns in particular places. I ask you, do you agree? So you say, well, I suppose so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Arnold. We have a few minutes left.
We could have some questions, yeah?
Yes, I invite questions.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
Professor Arnold.
I just wonder why we don't put stress on biology.
Right.
Biology.
Okay.
Okay. No, we are referring to the two kinds of books. The
Yep.
book about biology and book about language. So I think we can put the same degree of intonation on biology. Am I right?
Yes and no. Yes, you are right in that that's an important word, and so it's a good candidate for being accepted. No, in the sense that I'm trying to keep things as simple as I can, so I systematically mark the onset accent and the nuclear accent, and I ignore those that are between. Why? Because they can always be suppressed as far as the intonation is concerned. That is, we can say the ones about biology and language. We don't have to say the ones about biology and language. So there doesn't have to be any change of intonation in the middle. The only two places where you must have a change of intonation are at the onset and at the nucleus. So you're right in that it's possible, but I'm right in that it's not necessary, and I'm trying to keep things as simple as possible.
Any other questions, please? Any questions?
That was a very good question, and it's something that you correctly noticed, because this is, I've made various innovations, and this is one of them, and maybe I'm wrong in trying to simplify it in this way, but whenever you've got three things, one after another, A, B, C, you can suppress the intonation on the middle one, A, B, C. The big bad wolf, the big bad wolf. I must disagree. I must disagree. An international conference. An international conference. Principles of English rhythm. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, Ms. O'Hara.
Thank you very much for a wonderful lecture. I have a question. Do native speakers always perfectly understand each other?
No, of course we don't. This is something that's very interesting, and as far as I know, there hasn't been much investigation of how far we do or don't understand one another. Anybody who attempts to transcribe material from real life, intonation, very quickly comes up against the problem that transcribers don't agree exactly what's happening. Sometimes it's difficult to tell where the nucleus is. That's, on the whole, not too hard. It's certainly difficult to determine how many groups there are, whether an accented syllable is a nucleus or just an accent at the head or somewhere. Strangely enough, it's quite often difficult to decide whether you have a fall, a rise, or a fall rise. In rapid speech, when, the way Dr. Ashby demonstrated them, we had these enormous movements with a fall and a rise and a fall rise. Well, all right, but real life isn't like that. In real life, you go, oh, and there's not much movement. And in genuine speech, there's sometimes just not enough movement to determine, particularly between a fall rise and a fall. You can't hear whether you're going up again or not at the end. No, there's a fall. No, there's a fall rise. The speaker may know which, but the hearer can't hear. In fact, the key to all of this is to access the speaker's intention. And there's no way of doing that objectively except by asking the speaker. We can, as transcribers, try and transcribe what we perceive, and that's maybe a good way of, yes, saying what the hearer can pick up from it, but we can only check that against the speaker's intention if the speaker tells us what he intended, and they don't. So this is a very difficult problem to approach in order to give a good answer to the question you correctly asked.
Thank you very much.
Professor Wells is the director of the UCL Summer Course in English Phonetics. So if you are motivated enough to learn more about English phonetics, please go attend the summer course in English phonetics. It's held every summer, usually in August.
The summer I've got a picture of it.
Skip 2006 will be held at UCL on the 7th
about Chinese
to
characters.
the 18th of August 2006. Yes, please search for the website and please apply. Yes, please book early. Yes, you'll get a discount if you book early. I recommend that you book.
I should say that Dr. Patricia Ashby directs a special stream within this directed at the International Phonetic Association certificate examination, which a small subset of the people take. Most people take the general EFL-oriented course, but there is that as well. And Michael Ashby and Patricia Ashby and I all teach on the summer course together with many other phoneticians.